Good afternoon to our friends in Japan. Welcome to today's webinar on how to identify an original and impactful research topic. In the next hour or so, I will explain to you how you can go about coming up with new ideas to make sure that your research will be new, novel, and interesting to a wider audience and have an impact. My name is Richard de Krijs. I am a consultant for the Enago Academy and have been doing this since about 2016. In my day job, I'm a professor of astrophysics at Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. So good day from Australia. So before I begin, I would like to give you a brief overview of what Enago is and can do for you. Enago is the world's leading author services provider, and its motto, author first, quality first, ensures that the authors receive only the best quality output and excellent user experience at all times. This unrelenting focus on authors' needs means that Enago never compromises on its quality systems and processes at any cost. On the slide, you can see the track records of the company and the fact that it's broad-ranging and offers a lot of different author services. Enago's services are designed keeping in mind the author's need. Enago Academy, and that's what you are listening to today, is the author training platform that educates authors through a number of resources, including today, webinars and workshops, live one-on-one workshops. Enago also has an e-learning platform for researchers called Enago Learn, along with a live one-on-one consultation platform called Enago Consult. So that's the one-on-one platform. Enago offers world-class services to researchers at different stages of their research career, such as a two-editor system English language editing service, academic and non-academic translation service, manuscript preparation service, and publication support service. The Enago Promise guarantees that a manuscript edited by the company will never be rejected on the basis of poor language. On the rare occasions that rejection does occur for this reason, Enago will take full responsibility for re-editing the paper for resubmission at no additional cost. Enago's comprehensive after-sales services will support you at every step of the way until your manuscript is published. They are designed to take care of every need from the time you receive Enago's main services until you are published. Enago's research communication services are designed to help researchers effectively communicate their research findings. So that's all about Enago that I wanted to share with you at this point. They are the hosts of this webinar. In case you are interested in any of their services, their email address is shown there at the bottom of the page. Now, without further ado, let us go into today's session. Here is my agenda, and you can see what we will be talking about, 6 different topics. We will start by introducing us to the academic publishing landscape, and we will particularly look at where Japan's publishing landscape sits with respect to the rest of the world. And it looks pretty good, I have to say. Then we look at strategies for an impactful literature review, the first thing you need to do when coming up with a new research topic. The third item will be selecting an original and impactful research topic and how to go about that, how to find the gap in the research that's there and that you can get into. 4 expert tips to increase the visibility and discoverability of your manuscript. So how do you get your work out there so that colleagues and a broader audience might actually benefit from your work? We will then introduce research impact and talk about research impact analysis. And finally, we conclude with strategies to increase your research impact. And that's, of course, quite important, particularly for early career researchers, but for all researchers, really. So let's start by looking at the academic publishing landscape. And as you can see in this graphical representation, academic publishing is a complex international ecosystem involving individual researchers, universities and research institutes, funders and policymakers, libraries and publishers, and also other intermediaries such as peer reviewers, etc. It is important that all parties involved, the author, the journal editor, the peer reviewer, the publisher, that they adapt ethical practices. That is an increasingly big problem, well, not necessarily a problem, increasingly big issue in the world of publishing with predatory publishers and people committing plagiarism. So we have to act, everyone has to act ethically. So let us look at the global research and development expenditure and see where your country, Japan, is cited in this graph. Now, what you see here on the horizontal axis is research and development expenditure as a percentage of your national gross domestic product. And on the vertical axis, we see the number of researchers per million inhabitants. And there is a very rough linear increase there, and you can see that Japan is among the forerunners with 3.4% of GDP spent on research. That compares with the United States, that's the big purple circle in the middle, of 2.7%, and China, which is the big red circle at the bottom, of 2%. So Japan outspends competing countries quite significantly. Japan is one of the top publishers of scientific articles in the world. What we see here on the horizontal axis is the number of citations, average number of citations per document published. And on the vertical axis is the H index. We will talk about the H index later on during the webinar, but just to give you a brief definition of the H index, it's the number of citations to papers published in the previous 2 years divided by the number of papers published in those 2 years. And Japan in 2020, this is always, it depends on when you look at this. So this is a figure from 2020. Japan had an H index of 1,036, receiving an average of 17 citations per document. And that is a pretty good track record. Among the top academic publishing countries, Japan is, depending on which metric you use, Japan is in the top 5 or 6 in terms of documents, number 5 in terms of the H index, probably also number 5 actually. You can see that on the right-hand side of the screen here. All right, so those are the metrics, and you want to contribute to the success of your country, of course. So how do we go about doing so? Well, let's look at publishing trends today and moving forward. And there are quite a lot of things happening in international academic publications. First, there is a substantial rise in the number of research articles posted on preprint servers, such as arXiv, bioRxiv, etc. This has been an acceleration since the COVID pandemic started, and suddenly more publishers allow researchers to post their work prior to public publication on public preprint servers. This is good for a wider dissemination of your research to other colleagues and beyond, to policymakers, for instance. Social media is increasingly proving instrumental in driving attention to scientific publications. We can think Facebook is an obvious one, Twitter, WhatsApp, many other social media. We'll talk about social media towards the end of the webinar. The scientific workflow these days is highly automated, which has simplified the submission process. I have been an active academic since the mid-1990s, And initially, when I submitted my academic papers to journals, it would take me an hour or more to submit my manuscript. These days, it is a matter of uploading your source files or your PDF files, clicking a few buttons, adding some information, and within 15 minutes, have you submitted your paper. So it's highly automated, and that makes things faster. Use of artificial intelligence and machine learning has greatly accelerated the peer review process, and that's particularly in the larger fields like biology and medicine, where an initial sifting of submitted manuscripts might be done by a computer. Scientific publishing is being revamped quite significantly by initiatives such as Planets and Project Deal. Planets is a European or British and European initiative that is pushing the major economies to publish open access and not in subscription-based journals. Open access, of course, has a wide appeal, and more people will be able to access your work. Related to that, related also to the COVID pandemic at the moment, an increasing number of publishers are opening their content that is traditionally sitting behind a paywall, only accessible to those of you whose institutions, or in your case, if your university has access to a subscription, but many more publishers these days allow you to access certain content without having to pay for it. And that's again something that was accelerated during the COVID pandemic. Then leading researchers have demonstrated positive inclination towards open science. Open science has been around for a decade, or perhaps somewhat longer than a decade, but it's mostly been fairly low quality for a long time, but that's changing now. More and more leading researchers also have embraced the idea of open access to reach beyond their immediate peers in the discipline. And then, of course, novel tools for research dissemination, such as video abstracts and late summaries, are becoming more popular. In my area of physics and astrophysics, a number of journals are now allowing you to add a video abstract that you then upload to YouTube, for instance, to your paper, or provide a brief summary for the general public in addition to an abstract for your peers. So that's where we are with the academic publishing landscape today, and where I think we will be going in the next decade or so. So let's take a step back and think about writing our own research paper. The first thing we need to do is review the existing literature in our area of interest. So how do we go about reviewing the literature effectively? Well, it's a three-step process. First, perform an exhaustive literature search on the topic you are considering researching and publishing. It doesn't harm to start from Google, but don't make that your only starting point. Databases, academic databases, publication databases, and general search together will allow you to get an overview of the topic of interest, and also from that starting point, enable you to understand where the gaps are in the research that require urgent attention of filling. In addition to reading a lot of papers, a lot of websites, a lot of information, policy documents, depending on your area of research, you should talk to experts in the field about the latest developments. If you're a junior researcher, talk to your supervisor, talk to the head of department, talk to more senior people, talk to your mates, to your friends. They probably have insights that you don't have yet, and vice versa. You can provide them with information as well. It is a networking ecosystem that we require to actually move forward. And then, of course, attend international conferences of the most prominent scientific societies in your field. And interestingly enough, because of the travel restrictions imposed by COVID, this is getting easier, because pretty much all international conferences are being held online, or at least in hybrid mode, so that you always have an online component, and the cost of attending will be lower. You don't have to fly to a conference, you don't have to pay for a hotel accommodation and food at a foreign destination, but you still get access to excellent talks by the leading scientists in your field. The downside, of course, of online meetings is that there is not that direct one-to-one contact between attendees that you happen to have in face-to-face meetings. And so there is something to say for both online and face-to-face. There are positives and negatives to both of those. But set your foundation. Do your literature search based on the available databases that you have access to. Talk to people who are knowledgeable in the field, and seek more information by attending the relevant conferences. Here are some tips to foster creative thinking, because once we have read all of the literature, how do we go about identifying the gaps in the literature? Well, brainstorm for ideas and note down everything that you feel is challenging or interesting. You may not be able to research everything that you identify, but it will give you a list of possibilities to eventually choose the most impactful from. Question preconceived ideas or assumptions. Don't just accept it if someone says, oh, but that's the way it has always been. You may ask questions, why? Why has it been like that? What is the underlying assumption, and is the underlying assumption valid? And how do we know that the underlying assumption is valid? So all these questions you can ask, and you should feel free to ask questions like that. Discuss your thoughts with people both inside and outside of your discipline, and that's particularly interesting, of course, if your work is interdisciplinary. When scanning the literature in those databases, in Google, in all kinds of content management systems, when scanning through the literature, keep asking questions such as why, how, what if, why not? Be critical. Don't just accept whatever is published as the gospel in your field, because what is published might be incorrect. It may have been correct at the time of publication, but it might be incorrect today. So here is an opportunity to make progress. And then finally, once you've done all that, you've got your list, you've asked critical questions, you can rank your list of questions that you would like to research from the most impactful to the least impactful. And so you can select the types of questions you think will help you move your career forward. So what qualifies as a research problem? It could be either a new theory or something that's weird, an anomaly about an already established research topic. It could also be that a known theory that is more or less accepted in your field has certain aspects that have not been explored very well, or that can be expanded upon, or that require more investigation in different environments and or under different circumstances. It's not that hard to come up with a research problem. It's hard to come up with a problem that's impactful. So here are some tips to find an original research topic. First, think of a new topic quite broadly. Don't start narrow. Start broad, and from there narrow it down. That's called the inverted funnel approach. Start broad and narrow down your topic until you've got a narrow topic where you can actually make an impact in your area. Search for topics, perhaps from your coursework or class assignments if you're a student. Once you have your ideas, it's always good to use someone else, your peers, your classmates, the other students, maybe slightly more senior people, to bounce your ideas off of them. So brainstorm ideas, talk about your ideas to see what kind of interest they generate. If you find something interesting, do your peers, do your friends find them interesting too? If so, that's good. If not, you may want to look for something else to research. Be aware of ongoing or current research trends. Attend those conferences, read the literature, talk to your seniors. Look up theses from the academic library of your institution. Just see what your predecessors have worked on, and then go to the final chapter of a thesis and read the suggestions for further research. Pretty much all theses include a section like that suggests that, okay, we've done this amount of research on a particular topic. we've made some progress, but actually our research has thrown up many more questions. Some of the questions are the following. So read the final chapter of a thesis of interest, a number of theses of interest from the library, and hopefully that will also help you find an original research topic. Then discuss your ideas with your supervisors, mentors, or lecturers. Don't keep it to yourself. In general, the academic community is quite honest. They will not steal your idea, but they will actually support you in starting to work on a project, ideally in collaboration, of course. And if you collaborate with someone more senior, we will talk about that in just a moment, you can actually benefit from their expertise and their experience. And so that's a win-win situation for all of you. And then finally, search scientific data repositories and the literature using the correct keywords. We'll talk about keywords shortly. So let's look at the literature review that you're meant to do. And you need to do this for any research project. There is no shortcut to doing a literature review. You have to read, read, and read. That's it. You can't shortcut. You can't take a shortcut. There's just no way around reading. You need to know what's happening in your field. So the literature review is a systematic and comprehensive search of all types of literature, published and unpublished, relevant to your proposed investigation and guided by your research goals. So what does that mean? Your literature review forms the starting point for your work. That's the first thing you need to do. You need to know where the gap is. It helps you discover which topics have already been studied related to your subject of interest. And so that means that once you know what has been done already, you will not do the same thing and duplicate research, because duplication of work, there is some merit to that, but it's very difficult to get duplicated work published because it's not novel, and it might be a waste of your time. And so once you've done the literature review, it also provides your scholarly authority. You can say, well, I've studied the literature, I know what's there, these other scientists have published in my area, and based on that work, I have identified where to go to next. So here are some general tips for your literature review. First, choose a research topic. I started by telling you to start searching broadly and then narrow it down. You don't want to go for a very broad field, but you want to go for a subfield within your field of interest, but not too narrow either. If it's too narrow, it's unlikely to generate the interest of other people in the field, or you may not find too many literature sources that can help you move forward. So just kind of in the middle is the best size. So that's difficult to identify, I realize that. Decide and define this based on that, the scope of your review. So what are you going to talk about and what are you not going to cover? That's very important as well. You can write at some point in your paper, this aspect of our research is beyond the scope of our research. So you need to know what the scope of your research is. Identify relevant keywords and databases to conduct your research. We'll talk about keywords in a moment. And then ask the right questions to conduct an in-depth analysis of the research. So once you've got your research topic, which is a middle-sized topic, you know what you talk about and the scope of your review, then you can ask the deep questions to see what is still missing from the area. So how do we identify research gaps? There are some suggestions here. First, look for ideas and inspiration from publications. I mentioned the final chapters of theses. Are there any unaddressed issues that have been identified by the people working in this area before you? If so, can you address them? Do you find them interesting? And do you think that they will make an impact? Then discuss your ideas and seek advice from your research supervisors or seniors. It's good to talk to your peers, those are the people at your same level, but it's also good to discuss it with more senior people because they will have a wider overview of the field in which you are interested. They've been around for longer, so they probably know what happened a number of years ago and also where the current state of the art is. Then look for trending research topics and for the most cited research articles. How do you do that? Look on social media. Many social media, academic social media accounts talk about what's hot. Many journals also provide the most cited research articles on their websites. So if there is a particular journal in your field that you keep getting back to with lots of papers published in that journal or in a small number of journals, go to their main website and check what the hot topics are. There is no doubt a section on their homepages that tells you what the most cited research articles are. 4, keep a tab on the key concept section of prominent journal websites that highlight central ideas in their fields. Some journals have that, not all journals do. But yeah, so in essence, what you want to do is you want to know if there is a journal you are particularly interested in publishing in. You want to make sure that your research fits within the aims and scope of the journal, so within the key concepts of what that journal focuses on. And then finally, scan through recent articles for insights into the latest developments and challenges. And again, it's good to talk to your supervisors or seniors for suggestions of key articles in your field that you should read before moving on. So it's all about talking to people and setting yourself up within a network of potential collaborators or at least colleagues who can help you when you get stuck and point you at the next into the next direction. So here are a few strategies to locate articles of interest. And I'll show you some examples in the next few slides. First, create keyword combinations. First, identify keywords and then create combinations using Boolean operators. Boolean operators are and, or, etc. We'll go to that. I will go to that now. Let's actually go to that now. So here are some examples of Boolean operators. And is one of them, used to combine search words and include all of them in your research. So if you have two keywords that you both want to be included in your paper, you include them using and. Similarly, if you want to have papers that discuss either one keyword or a second keyword, you can use or in between. And here is an example of how that works. This is from the PubMed database. You can see in the top search bar, we are looking for articles that contain both blueberry and diabetes. So that is the and Boolean operator. In the bottom one, we are searching for articles that contain either blueberry or diabetes, not both. Or it could be both, but one of them is good enough. So that's how that works. You can use double quotes. That's the bottom left there, to include an exact phrase in your research. You may have done it. You may have gone to Google, typed your name in the Google search bar and put the double quotes around it. So that means the entire name as typed must occur in the output. Or you can also say, add the word not, which means that the word or the phrase in double quotes following the word not should not be contained in the results. So here again are some examples of that. At the top here in the PubMed search bar, we have blueberry consumption within double quotes. That means that our articles that we are looking for must contain that phrase, those two words in that order next to each other in order to be returned. At the bottom, we have, and I forgot to say, I'll go back and explain the final one, the round brackets. These are used when you need to search, when you need your search to be performed in a certain order. So let's see how that works here. We have there in the search bar, blueberry consumption, diabetes or glycemic index, and not cancer. Now, let's tease out what we're saying there. We don't want articles that contain the word cancer. So that's the final bit. We want to look for articles that contain the words blueberry consumption. And since there are no double quotes here, that could be one or the other, or both. And then those articles should also contain either diabetes or glycemic index. So this is a kind of a nested way of searching for what it says at the bottom: returns results that are related to blueberry consumption, diabetes, and glycemic index, and exclude studies related to cancer. This is complex. Play around with it and see where you go. Some examples. So how do we go about selecting an original and impactful research topic? Most importantly, how do we check the novelty of our selected topic? Use the right keywords to search and filter articles published previously and available in the scientific database that you're searching. So think carefully about what concepts am I looking for? What are the keywords associated with those concepts? Secondly, scan recently published PhD theses. Again, go to the library, or you can find them online, possibly on the library website, and have a look at what your predecessors have been working on. And so what has been done already? What has not yet been done? What would be novel? Novel means new and exciting, right? Look for topics or studies that top journals in your field are publishing at the moment. In addition to the top journals, look at what's being published in Nature. In my field, in astrophysics, we call Nature the journal of wrong results, but that's because about half of the papers in my field in Nature are wrong. I've published a few myself, and half of my papers in Nature have been wrong, but that's okay. It's impactful, your university will love you for it, and you might get a good job because you've published in Nature. Read as many review articles as possible. It's always a good start that if you start out from scratch, from nothing really, and you want to know what's happening in the field, start by reading the review articles, the recent review articles in your field. From the recent review articles, follow the reference trail. What does that mean? You read your review article, and at some point the authors will refer to previous work in the area of interest. And so you can then go and find that particular reference and read that paper. From there, you might find more papers you want to read, and so you follow the reference trail. Students often ask me, how far back or how far do I have to go down the reference trail? If you keep doing this, if you keep reading and following the reference trail, after a while, you realize that you keep coming back to the same articles or the same concepts, the same results, and you don't find much news anymore. At that point, you know that you have covered most of the field of interest and you've read most of the interesting and important articles. So it depends on how big your field is, how large your field is, before how long it takes before you get to that point. Sometimes supervisors say, we don't want you to cite anything that's older than 5 or 10 years old. I think that is not the correct approach to doing science, because in some fields, the seminal paper, the most important paper that kicked off your field, may have been published in 1953. And it might still be valid today, maybe not quite in the same form as it was in 1953, but it was the paper that kicked off your field. So obviously, you will need to know what is in that paper, right? So that's a lot more than 5 or 10 years ago. And then, of course, check out which conferences are happening in your field of interest. You may not go to them, but their abstracts and the titles will often be available online. So you can skim through those conference abstracts. And if you can get access to the proceedings, so that's the write-up, the articles published at the end of the conference, that will give you an overview of what the hot topics are, because people discuss hot topics at conferences. That's what conferences are for. So we've gone through all of this, and you might be very concerned now that I've given you a lot of information about how to select a topic and you're completely confused. Don't worry, that happened to all of us. Ask yourself the following 7 questions. Does the topic have potential to be published in a high impact journal? If you don't know the answer to that, talk to your supervisor, talk to your seniors, and see if they're excited about your work. If you can excite someone else about your work, that means it's potentially sufficiently exciting to have a high impact. Second, is the topic interesting, meaningful, and relevant? And that really depends on your field. But that is the question. If you can't say yes to that question, then it's probably not worth researching that topic. Third, will the topic help me develop skills and further my career? That has to do with, can I publish in a high impact journal? Have I gathered relevant preliminary data? If you have some preliminary data, you can see if your idea for the next research project might work, or maybe not. The data are not good enough. Also, if you need funding, you often need to show that you've got some data already that are sufficiently promising for you to take that next step with the funding that you're asking for. So preliminary data, in some fields more important than in others. Is the topic challenging? If it's very simple, it will have been done already. You just have to look harder and find it in your literature review. If it's challenging, most likely it's not been done. Will the topic attract funding? Most of the time these days, we need funding to make progress, funding to publish, funding to get consumables for our laboratory-based research, funding to go to a conference when we can travel again. Your supervisor might apply for funding to pay your salary or your scholarship, right? For all of that, we need funding. So it is important that what you research can actually attract funding. And then, does your topic have wide applicability? Is it a niche area, very narrow, or is it much broader and of interest to many other people in your field or and outside your field? So ask these questions, and you need to say yes to at least a few of them. Check prior to finalizing your topic. First, I have the know-how to carry out this research. I can do this research. Second, I have enough funds to do this research. Third, my supervisors, seniors, collaborators have the appropriate expertise to help me troubleshoot if the need arises. What that means, if you get stuck, is there someone who can help you? And that's very important. That's what science is all about. It's all about collaboration. It's not about you doing it on your own. It's about a network, and it's about collaborating. Then 4, my lab has the required infrastructure to carry out my research. Do you have the equipment that you need to do your research? Do you have access to that equipment? Do you have to pay to access that equipment? All of these are important questions. If the answer to them is no, it's unlikely that you will do a good job. And do you have enough time to carry out the research? Is it something you can do in half a year, in a year, or do you need a decade? The decade you probably don't have. The year you probably do, right? So here are some tips to increase the visibility and discoverability of your manuscript. So how do other people find your work? And so most people will be searching for your work using search engines, academic search engines. Think of the likes of Google Scholar, for instance. So these are, and so the results from those searches ideally throw up your work at the very top. So that is academic search engine optimization. So that other people can find the relevant academic texts. Now, relevance and impact of research are measured, among other things, by counting the number of views, downloads, and citations a publication has received. So academic search engine optimization helps authors and researchers achieve a better ranking for their publications. As a consequence, they will become better known. And as a consequence of that, you might attract more funding and get a good job. So here, the 3 principal elements of a manuscript that require optimization are the title, the keywords, and the abstract. Think about it. You've read academic papers, I'm sure. Always the title. A good title is very important. We'll talk about that in a sec. After that, you get the names of the authors and their institutions. Then you get the abstract, and at the bottom of the abstract, often there is a line or maybe 2 lines containing keywords. All of those can be tweaked to make them as good as possible for other researchers to find your work. So here are some tips to optimize your title. Most important, use meaningful titles that contain important search terms and principal findings of your research. How do you do that? Well, if you were to look for your paper, what would be the search terms you would be looking for, right? So by using the search terms you would use to find your work, can you find your work back? In other words, is the title sufficiently optimized that using those search terms, it will be thrown out by the search engine? Position the most important terms, phrases, or words at the beginning of your main title, because many people, particularly more senior people, they skim through titles, particularly only the first part if it's a long title. So you need to grasp their attention as quickly as possible at the start of your title, if possible. Avoid special characters such as hyphens, suspended hyphens, asterisks, etc., because the search engines might not deal with them properly. I talked about long titles, but my recommendation is to keep your titles short. Certainly don't let them run for more than 2 lines in the printed version of a research paper. No one is going to read them or even understand such long titles. What you may want to do is have a short title and a short subtitle. So usually you put a colon, 2 dots in between, with let's say the first part of the title being the broader area, the second part of the title being the area of interest that you have researched. That is a good trick, good strategy to use a slightly longer title that is still understandable by people who are quickly scanning through the titles of papers that were published recently. Do not, if you can, include abbreviations or acronyms unless absolutely necessary, and unless these acronyms and abbreviations are so common in your field that it doesn't make sense to spell them out. If you can't say that is the case, don't use abbreviations, use a different combination of words. Avoid, so that's the final one, follow guidelines of good and ethical scientific practice. Avoid funny or creative titles. You may be tempted to write a very funny title, and I admit I've done this earlier in my career as well, have 1 or 2 papers with a funny title, but you will find that not many people will be able to find them because they're not looking for funny words, they're looking for proper keywords in the title. So let's talk about the keywords then. How do we do that? How do we optimize the combination? Use discipline-specific thesauri, so collections of keywords such as MESH, the medical subject headings, and M-Tree or Google Trends to identify suitable keywords. Look at other papers, see what people have used there. If you use keywords, when you use keywords, use the singular form. Don't use plural if not necessary. Your keywords, usually 5, 6 or so in number, should alternate between specific and broader terms. So the broader field and the narrower field in which you have done your research, to increase the chances that a researcher who is looking for work in your area may actually find your paper. Use content-specific words that describe your publication, including, for instance, a place or country if you've done location-specific research, the methodology, results, all keywords that describe those aspects. Use words that provide additional information and are not obvious from the title. This is a very important one. You already optimized your title. You do not want to repeat title words in the keywords because that has no benefit because the title words will already be found. So the keywords that you use should be related but different from the title words. And then, as I said before, you are looking for information to do your literature review. What keywords would you use to find your paper? And so include those keywords in your paper as well, of course, because then people will be able to find it. And the final aspect, we've talked about the title, the keywords, and now let's talk about the abstract. Abstracts tend to be short. They tend to be a maximum of, let's say, 250 words. Some journals like Nature and the top journals may only allow you 150 words. Make sure that your abstract is short, succinct, precise, and uses clear sentences. What does that mean? Make sure it's to the point. We'll talk about what that means in just a second. Position the most important and relevant terms at the beginning of your abstract. Use synonyms, so words meaning the same thing with different words, to increase the likelihood of being found by search engines. Your abstract must be informative. It must clearly state your objectives, methodology, and key results. If you're unsure about writing abstract, and it's one of the hardest things you do as an author, first of all, you write your abstract. It's the first thing in your paper after the title. It's the last thing you write, right? Because you cannot write an abstract properly until you've finalized the research and your paper that includes the discussion of the results. Once you've done that, you know what your paper is about, and then you can write a summary of the paper. An abstract is really a summary of the paper. You can almost have, let's say, one sentence for your paper contains an introductory section. Your abstract should have a single sentence introductory sentence. The methods is the next section in your paper. Your abstract should contain 1 or 2 sentences about which methods you use to achieve your goals. The next section in your paper will be results. There should be 2 sentences in your abstract discussing the results that you found in your paper. Following the results section, you will have a discussion section. Your abstract should contain a single sentence, possibly 2, of the discussion that you are doing in your paper. And then the final section in your paper will be your conclusion section. Of course, the abstract should also have a single sentence conclusion. So if you count up the number of sentences I just mentioned for the abstract, we have about 10 sentences containing up to 250 words or so. What I was just describing is called a structured abstract. I don't have the time to talk about structured abstracts today, but do a Google search for structured abstract. Remember, put that between double quotes so that you can actually find structured abstracts, and there will be a lot of information as to how to write structured abstracts. And then finally, in the abstract, repeat some of the keywords to increase the ranking of your paper across the search engines, because if you have more hits in the search engine, you end up higher on the eventual list. So let's talk a bit about research impact. What is research impact? Well, the various government agencies around the world have defined research impact. I'll talk about the bottom one here because I'm based in Australia. Research impact is the contribution that research makes to the economy, society, environment, or culture beyond the contribution to academic research. It doesn't mean that you have to make a profit or that the economy has to benefit from it, as long as it has an impact beyond the academy. What is impactful research? Research can be impactful if it increases your understanding and awareness of an issue or a problem. If I write a paper about astronomy, which doesn't have a direct economic impact, but I wow my audience of amateur astronomers with new insight, that is impact. Right? Of course, impact can also have an economic benefit. If it fosters changes in attitudes, values, and beliefs, if it results in economic benefits, if it has positive environmental implications, that's often for policy papers, if it contributes to change in policies or formation of new or different guidelines, if it has societal impact, such as improvement in human rights, and if it assists individuals or groups to cope with anticipated changes. So impact can be very broad, can be anything outside of the university or academy. How do we find out about impact? Why is research impact crucial? It assists you in identifying collaborators within or outside of your subject area. It assists in increasing chances of securing funds by showing the value of your research. I'm currently going through that myself, wrote a large grant application here in Australia. I got comments back from the assessors. They're asking me, define the impact better. And so I have to do that. We did that in our proposal, so I just refer back to the proposal, but still, this is something that has an effect on whether or not you get funding. Helps in identifying who is using your work and confirming that it is appropriately credited. Helps in managing your scholarly reputation. High impact papers, great for your reputation as a scholar or scientist. Helps in quantifying return on research investment, so you get new grants. And impact helps to strengthen your case when you apply for promotion or even tenure. So impact is becoming increasingly important in universities and research institutes worldwide. So there are different types of studies that talk about impact. They're called metrics studies. We start by bibliometrics, quantitative analysis of publications using mathematical and statistical methods to determine research output. We'll talk about that in the next slide. Scientometrics is quantitative analysis of scientific literature in terms of productivity, reception, individual scientific contributions and trends. Talk about that too. And altmetrics, which is in essence alternative metrics that measure the impact on social media and the news. Let's see what these mean. Bibliometrics is the number of times your paper, your bibliographic item, is cited in other important papers. Identified using numbers of citations, the journal impact factor, the H index, which we'll talk about in a moment, and the number of publications. Webometrics then, scientometrics really, is the number of times the web link or the URL of your bibliographic record or the web page of the author is read, visited, downloaded, or linked. And then finally, altmetrics is the number of times the record is mentioned or shared via social networks, blogs, search engines, websites, covered by the news, or referred to in policies. I'll give you an example from one of my own papers. 2 years ago, one of my former students, Xiaojian Chen, wrote an article published in Nature Astronomy, and it was a big hit. It was about the shape of our Milky Way galaxy. And it got a very high altmetric score. You can see, this was from last weekend when I put this together, 2,840, really high score. And that high score actually got us in the 2019 altmetric top 100. In 2019, altmetric, the company, tracked 2.7 million research outputs, and we were number 60 out of 2.7 million, because at the end of 2019, we had an altmetric score of 2829. So you can see this was really cool, really interesting. So that's how altmetrics can actually help you, and my university loved it. Now, let's talk about scholarly metrics first. We have 3 types of metrics: journal level, article level, and author level. The journal level you have heard of, the journal impact factor, for instance, or the SCImago journal rank or site score. Those are not something you can do something about. What you can focus on are article level metrics and author level metrics. Usage, impact, reach of published articles. And some examples are shown there, and we'll talk about those examples in just a moment. So what is the impact of you as an author or your article as an article on the field? That's what those metrics measure. Here's an example of article level metrics from the Web of Science, which is one of the main databases. You have to pay for it, although Publons, which is part of that, is free to access. And here's an example of a paper. On the right-hand side, you see that paper was cited 5,814 times. It got a little award, highly cited paper, awarded if the publication is in the top 1% of similar articles. And also probably a hot paper, means good impact at early times. There is another metric here called PLUMX, which is the impact of an article not based on citations, but based on usage. That's views, clicks, downloads, library access, captures, how many times do people bookmark the paper, put it in, include it in their reference manager like Mendeley, or favorite it. Mentions in the news, blog posts, reviews, comments, Wikipedia, that's a bit similar to Altmetric. Social media, similarly, how many likes, shares, and tweets. And then finally, citations in terms of citation indexes, clinical citations, patent citations, policy citations, etc. So that's an interesting, novel way of looking at the importance of individual articles. At the author level, the most important metric we use these days is the H index, also known as the Hirsch index, after the guy who invented it. It quantifies the impact of an individual author. In essence, if your H index in this example on the right is 6, that means that you have 6 publications with each of them having at least 6 citations. There are some limitations to this. It varies based on your discipline of research. In medicine, it will be very high. In mathematics, it will be very low because of the difference in citation behavior of the practitioners. It's often higher for popular and high interest subject areas. It's higher for people who publish in English than in non-English languages. And it's higher for people who are part of large groups rather than smaller teams. On the right-hand side, you see a difference between 2 researchers. Researcher A is an early career researcher, has 4 highly cited papers, and that's it. So that researcher's H index is 4. Researcher B is mid-career. He has many more papers, but he has 12 papers, but not many citations. Only 4 of those papers have more than 4 citations. So this researcher also has an H index of 4. There are different indices, but in view of the time, I think we should not spend too much time on this. There are ways to try to get around the fact that when you get more senior, your H index will increase automatically. So this is to take into account the career stage of people. The G index is one of them. So H index of 40 implies that the researcher has published a minimum of 40 articles with each 40 citations. A G index of 40 implies the researcher has published a minimum of 40 articles and combined has received at least 40 squared or 1600 citations. And then there is the Google I10 index, which is the number of articles with a minimum of 10 citations. So if a researcher has an I10 index of 40, then 40 articles have received at least 10 citations. To give you an example, I put some of my own metrics out here. At the bottom, this is what we use in my field, the NASA Astrophysics Data System. There are a lot of different indices there. My H index is the blue line, that's kind of the third from the bottom. At the current time, my H index is 46. The G index, which is that square thing, you can see it goes higher, that's the green line. And the I10 index, that's just the number of citations, number of papers with at least 10 citations goes off exponentially. So that's how your H index, your G index, and your I index increase over time. That's all I want to say here, really. I'm almost out of time, but I'm also almost done with my slides. So then, of course, at the author level, we can also have the field-weighted citation index, which you can get from Elsevier's SciVal website. Determines the ratio of citations relative to the expected number derived from the global average. So that means that if your field-weighted citation index equals 1, you have received exactly the number of citations expected for your field. If it's greater than 1, you are a high-impact researcher. If it's less than 1, you have had fewer citations than expected for your field. A similar one is the category normalized citation index from Insight, which is a Clarivate Analytics. That's the same company that runs the journal Impact Factor. That's the actual count of citing articles divided by the expected citation rate for similar works. Again, if that number equals 1, you have performed at the same level as your colleagues globally on average. If it's greater than 1, you have exceeded the expectations. If it's less than 1, you have failed to meet the expectations. So again, that is something that accounts for the fact that you have different career lengths, different age, different subject areas, etc. So that tries to homogenize the citation and publication output of researchers, no matter what their background is. Finally, how do we strategize to increase our research impact? Collaborate with experienced researchers. I mentioned this before. It is so important to collaborate. That's why we do science. We don't do it just for ourselves. We do it to be part of a network, and together we can actually achieve more than as a single individual. Use catchy subject-specific words in your article to make it easy for people to find hot topics. Aim for popular, high-quality journals to publish in. If the high-quality journals are peer-reviewed open access journals, absolutely go for those journals, and put your accepted papers on preprint servers if the journal that has accepted your work allows that. Publish in discipline-specific journals rather than broad journals for better citations. And once again, keep networking and promoting your work. Networking is important. So, what else can we do? Get an ORCID, an Open Researcher and Contributor ID. Go to ORCID, orcid.org, and claim your own number and attach it to every single output that you publish or create. That will stay with you for the rest of your career. Make all forms of your research output, publications, preprints, conference papers, posters, video abstracts, publicly accessible to increase visibility. Don't put it behind a locked paywall, firewall, or a private website. Just put it out there because you've published it, so you want other people to find your work. Share your research data via repositories, including here we have Figshare or Mendeley. Many of you may be using Mendeley already. Create an online profile that highlights your professional accomplishments and area of expertise. We'll talk about that in the next slide. And promote your work and be social. In other words, promote your work on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever. Professional social media and not the social media that you don't want to be associated with. And then, so here are some tools. ResearchGate and academia.edu and also Mendeley. These are the repositories that one can use. Many of them are actually commercial, but you can sign up for free and publish your achievements that way and make connections with researchers, other researchers in your field from all over the world, get feedback on your work, get feedback on your results, and maybe forge new collaborations. You can also have a profile on Impact Story. I was actually trying that this afternoon, but because my last name consists of 2 words, there are some problems in putting this all together, but try it if you like. Just search for Impact Story on Google, and then there are other ways as well. Once again, I would like to thank you for your attention. I hope it was useful. Inago will be in touch with everyone who registered for this webinar. Meanwhile, I would like to once again point out that this webinar was held in collaboration with the Gender Equality Office of the University of Yamanashi. And thank you also to the Gender Equality Office of Yamanashi University.